So this is going to be more the choose your own adventure part of the program. Each of these speakers will come up and give a 10-minute talk, up to 10-minute talk about what their breakout session will be. There is no Q&A buffer, so please be courteous to the people following you. And they're going to go, if you have your program, they're going to go in this order on the inside of your program. The Kinseys are that way on the first floor. The Tamalpais room is upstairs.
And you're in the theater.
And this is the theater. Thank you. And I'll just let everyone introduce themselves because that's probably part of their introduction. Let's do this. See you guys.
Okay. So I'm Carly Strasser, and my co-conspirator in our breakout is going to be here, Megan Laurance. And so I'm doing the quick overview of what we assume we might be talking about, although we're really hoping to get a lot of interesting ideas generated from the people that actually attend the breakout. So I'm here to talk mostly about open data and how that kind of complements open access. And so I am currently at the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, but my background is in research, and I worked for the Data One organization for a little while, and then I was at the CDL for a few years up until about January. And so since then I've been at the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and they're not verifying anything that I say as something that is foundation policy by any stretch. But I work in the Data-Driven Discovery initiative at the foundation, and so we have about $60 million to spend on researchers that are doing really cool things with data and big data, data science across all natural sciences domains. And so if you're familiar with the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, that's one of our funders or fundees, grantees. And we have other centers in other universities, University of Washington and NYU. And then we also fund individual investigators who are just doing really cool work that we think is exciting. So that's me. Megan, this is her shtick. So she's at the UCSF library. We'll see how I do introducing you. She's at the UCSF library, and she's a former researcher as well, and so she's a research informationist focused on showing the benefits of data sharing by teaching workshops on genomic data repositories and data reuse, and focuses on helping biomedical researchers comply with data sharing policies by guiding them to data repositories and showing them how to write data management plans, which incidentally is similar to some of the work I was doing when I was at CDL. And also comments and ideas are her own. So, let's see. So, what we're here to talk about today, all day, is open access and, right? So the breakouts are kind of open access and something else. And so for our group, it's going to be data, but you're probably aware that open blank is very popular right now in academia and in academic publishing and in kind of general scholarly communication conversations. And so there's all types of phrases that come about, like open notebook or open source, open data, open government. And I'm really excited about the open science part of things. I think of myself as an open science advocate, and this is about making the data, the research, and the publications available to everybody. So in some ways, it encompasses some of the other terms that are up here. And then we're, of course, going to be talking about data in our session. And so if you need a definition of it, data should be freely available to everyone to use and republish as they wish without restrictions from copyright, patents, or other mechanisms of control. So everybody can agree that not all data can be open for various reasons, but a lot of data can be open, and it's not necessarily common practice in the scientific communities to do this, to make data freely available for anybody to use however they want without restrictions. That's generally not, if you've ever talked to a researcher about their data, they generally don't feel this way about sharing. They're not interested in agreeing to these terms for their data sets. Which is understandable. So why should these people think about sharing their data? Well, there's lots of really good reasons, right? We've all seen this kind of reproducibility crisis that's being covered in the news. We've seen a lot of talk about how scientists are losing trust with the public. There's decreased funding. There's a tax on science in Congress going on right now. There's defunding of science in general. And data is really a key component to making sure that people understand the work that you're doing and proving the concepts that you have laid out in a publication. So really what I like to say is that scientists have an obligation to ensure reproducibility and trustworthiness because of these challenges that we're now facing. I think in previous years, scientists were kind of taken at their word as the educated people that people should listen to, but we don't have that luxury anymore. And so our obligation is really to make sure that people can see exactly how we got the results that we've come to. I like to say we, even though I don't do research anymore, but you know what I mean. So what's the problem? Why aren't people sharing their data? And if you've talked to them, you know that there's all kinds of great excuses that they can come up with. They say they own it, they don't want to get scooped, they're too busy, they want to maximize value extracted, and that generally it kind of takes away from what they really want to be doing, which is research and publishing papers. And so if we actually think about what the real problem is, it just comes down to incentives, right? So the incentive structure is not set up for researchers to get excited about making their data publicly available. They don't get credit for it. They don't receive any sort of accolades from tenure and promotion committees. And really, there's a lot of reasons not to share. It's a lot harder to make the case for why they should share, given the way that they are promoted in science. And there was a really good article out recently that said that the problem basically boiled down to the fact that the incentives for being a good researcher, academic researcher, are not well aligned with the incentives for being a scientist. So essentially, as a scientist, you want to make sure everybody can understand your work, it can be reproduced, it's transparent. As an academic researcher, your incentive structure looks a lot more like publishing papers, hoarding your data, and generally making sure that you get the maximum use out of the materials that you produce. And you use your time in a way that you're only producing things that are valuable for your career. Of course, I'd like to think that this is slowly changing. So if you look around, you can of course see that there are some indications that data is going to start being shared more broadly. And that's mostly because of the stick as opposed to the carrot. So the carrots are out there. They're a little bit harder to talk about. It's something I want us to talk about in the breakout session. But the sticks are these items. And so the journals are starting to come up with policies to require data sharing. PLOS most famously requires the data to be shared underlying a publication, and they've received a lot of flack for that. Funders are moving in this direction, slowly but surely. So the National Science Foundation, of course, has their policies around data management plans. There are other funders that are a little more aggressive about making things available. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation does a really good job of requiring any outputs to be open and everything to be transparent that's produced by their researchers. Unfortunately, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation does not have a similar policy, but it's not for my lack of trying, so we'll see how I do. I've only been there a few months. I'm going to keep pushing. And then, of course, peers are a very strong incentive for people to think about sharing. So I have enough time, I think, to mention a story that I like to tell about when I was a researcher, and I published one paper about genetics. It was a CLAM study that I did in grad school. I kind of dabbled in the area of genetics, published this paper. I picked a journal that seemed like a good journal to publish in. They required me to share my data and make it available via GenBank. I said, okay. I never did. They published my paper anyway. Actually, when I was sitting at CDL a few years ago, I got an email from a researcher who said, I just finished your paper, it's really great. I'm looking for the sequences on GenBank and I can't find them. I was like, oh, right, because I never got around to doing that. But here's the sequences. They're attached in this file. It's like, great, go ahead, use. You don't need to CC me, whatever, it's great. And I thought, good, my work here's done. I'm being a good scientific citizen and sharing. And he wrote back and said, I'm looking at your CV and I recognize that you're not a geneticist, but you should know that if you're going to play in our space, you have to share your data and you have to follow our rules and you have to put this stuff on GenBank and you should do it right now. And I did, of course. I was like shamed, and I scurried over to my computer and played with GenBank until I got it up, and then I sent him an email and said, okay, I did it. I'm sorry that I didn't do it in the first place. And so that's a really strong incentive for people to participate. And I think it's what we're going to have to potentially start looking to, is figuring out how to encourage the culture of sharing among researchers themselves and getting them excited about that. So some of the questions that we might cover in our session are here. So the role of libraries in data sharing, how it might differ across disciplines, whether or not the policies that are in place are working, and how or whether researchers are complying with the policies, how we can incentivize data, and then what tools might be available to help facilitate that. So that's all I've got.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you all had a great lunch. I'm Katrina Romanowsky. I'm the eScholarship Community and Outreach Manager at the California Digital Library. And I'm going to be joined in today's breakout session on OA Outreach and Advocacy by Anneliese Taylor, who is the Director of Scholarly Communications and Collections at UCSF. So this presentation, or this breakout session, is going to kind of dovetail with some of what you've already heard if you've been here all of the morning for the different sessions. So I've been working on the UC Open Access policy outreach areas that Catherine kind of went through, the results of what that's looked like, and so I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what that's looked like in the background. So for the introduction today, I'm going to kind of list a bunch of questions and then offer you some teasers that hopefully will get you to come join our session and talk through it with us. We don't necessarily have all of the answers, but we will be talking about the kinds of outreach that we have done at the CDL and at UCSF. And then bring you into the discussion as well. We have some topics to talk about, but we also really want to hear what's been going on with you, what sorts of outreach you've been engaged in, what you've found to be successful, those sorts of things. We really want it to be more of a discussion. So let's start with what's been really obvious so far today, that open access is a really big topic, and there's a lot to talk about with it. And it can be difficult to talk about as well, and it just keeps getting bigger and more important. And then the passing of the UC Academic Senate OA policy has really just increased that conversation. It's made it a lot more visible. It's just generated a lot more discussion going on. And so this is actually really good news, because it's bringing people forward who previously haven't been asking questions like, what is open access? What does it mean for me? And then hopefully, talking about the policy, they will ask, how do I participate in it? And then what this means is that there's a lot of other important questions that come up for the librarians in particular. Now that we have a foot in the door and something really solid for people to come and talk to us about with open access, how do we do that? How do we start talking about it? And then what resources can we offer, not just to the people who are asking us questions about the policy, but also resources to the librarians who are answering those questions. And then how do we keep this conversation going? So some people still might not hear about the policy, or they might hear about it and then kind of drift away from it, and we need to keep their attention. And then they may still need additional motivation. They hear about the policy, they think that's a great idea, but then we really need to encourage them to join in with it. And then just because the policy is a really big topic, that doesn't mean it's the only one that's happening right now. There's still a lot of other activity going on with open access, and campus librarians are the primary points of contact for all of those conversations, or for a lot of those conversations, like advocating for open access publishing in general. So those conversations don't go away just because the policy's here. In fact, they probably get even more prominence. So the big question is, how do we cover all of these things and do it effectively? So going back to the OA policy for a minute, this is the text of the policy. And this is the first page of the text of the policy. And as you can tell, it's complicated. And the truth is that most people don't understand it. And they're not going to take the time to sit down and read it and try to understand what they do with it. And realistically, we can't expect them to do that. We need to be able to provide them resources and help and encouragement to get them along that path. So our task is not easy, but it's definitely an intriguing one. It's to find ways to convey the information that people need to understand the policy, but also to do so in a way that engages them and makes them eager to join in and learn more. So I keep saying we, and what does we mean? And that comes to this question about centralized or localized efforts. How much can we consolidate our efforts by centralizing our resources? So that might be through CDL services, or it could be through the campuses banding together in some other ways. Obviously, some efforts are going to have to stay localized because every campus has its own specific needs, and departments have their own unique perspectives as well. But there are definitely areas that we can help each other out with and start reducing some of that duplication of effort. We don't all need to be doing the same things at different campuses separately. We can join in a little bit. So, like I said, that was a lot of questions to bring up, and we will try to answer as many as we can in the breakout session. And as a CDL representative, I'll be going through what we've done centrally to support the OA policy, OA outreach and advocacy in general, and especially around the OA policy. And then to give you a sneak peek of some of the things that we'll be talking about in more detail, we've tried out a variety of communication methods. This first one is a 90-second whiteboard animation video that introduces the policy and hopefully catches the viewer's attention to encourage them to learn more. So always grabbing attention right from the start, not throwing text at people, but saying, here's something quick that will get your attention. An Office of Scholarly Communication site that is a centralized point for information. So anytime anybody has questions, they know they can just go to one space and kind of branch out from there as they need. Some eye-catching ads that can direct people to that OSC site and can be embedded in other places. So you can see we've got Chris Kelty's face right here. He's got a few videos talking about the open access policy. And then we also have some ones about Rich Snyder, just talking about OA policy in general. And he was, again, a formative person in getting UCSFs passed. And then we just have a general OA policy ad to direct people to learn how to deposit, get their questions answered, things like that. Some of the other resources that we have, slide decks, an extensive but user-friendly FAQ with a decision tree, which is the one on the right, obviously, that lays out the path in a more clear and visual way. This decision tree, incidentally, was developed in collaboration with UCSF, so this is one of those examples of banding together to make these resources. And we used materials that they'd created to communicate with their faculty about the OA policy and adapting them to reach a wider audience. So this is something that I'll touch on again in the breakout session. Anneliese will have more information about kind of what their efforts looked like. And then finally, we have a wiki, which is a space that is meant for people who want to follow along with the project in more detail, the actual implementation of it. So you can see where each campus is at in the process and things like that. And then it also has, what I'll talk about again later, is a collaboration point where you can gather together outreach materials from the campuses, and that can be an area to kind of share those resources. So this was all CDL things, or CDL working with campuses, and then Anneliese is going to be bringing the campus perspective. While the campuses have worked closely with us on developing these resources or suggesting the centralized ones that we have in place, each campus has also been producing those resources of their own that are unique and address their particular needs. So she'll be talking about some of that. So again, this is meant to be a discussion, so please do join us if you want to hear what we've been doing, but then also if you want to share with each other. And there can be questions like, what's proven to be the most successful outreach method for your campus? What learning experiences have you had? What have you needed that hasn't been available? So that's a question where we're talking about all of these centralized resources, but maybe there's something that we haven't been providing that would have been really useful for you, and that's something to talk about as well. And I don't know if Mitchell Brown has already decided on the session, but if he doesn't come to this one, you should catch him and ask him about his uploadathons, which is accounting for that spike that Catherine showed earlier. He'll have some really good information for what he did on his campus as well. So it's really meant to be a discussion. We'll talk about all of our different ways that we've gathered resources and things like that. So please do join us.
Let me adjust the magic Mac. Hi, I'm Adam Siegel from UC Davis, and I was just going to offer, before I got started, a modest proposal. I think it was Michael Eisen this morning that said that, there are many different ways of defining open access, and nobody ever quite seems to know what it means. I would submit that probably people use the term should always use it as an adjective and never as a noun. That way you can say what you mean after you say open access, publishing, scholarship, policy, etc. Let me find my, here it is. So, okay, I've watched other people do this from the audience, and now that I'm here, yes? Okay, good. I see Joe getting up. So thank you. I'm going to be sort of part of a breakout session with Cori Hayden, who's chair of the anthropology department and former board member of Cultural Anthropology and Open Access Journal, and Ethan Rarick of IGS, director of IGS, who, and it's a longer title, California Policy and Politics. So two Berkeley faculty with Open Access Journal experience, and I'm going to help myself as well as soon as you're done. So thank you. So I'm here to talk about open access and its discontents because I tend to be the fly in the ointment. What I mean by that is I'm saying is that libraries have traditionally had a responsibility to do all sorts of things, and I think in our eagerness to advocate for open access, we have sometimes lost sight of some of our other responsibilities. So here's a timeline. Pretty much everybody in the room knows this timeline at this point. 2002, the Budapest Open Access Declaration, e-scholarship rolled out the same year. Your Campus OA Fund was started in 2008. UCSF Open Access Policy in 12, the UC Academic Senate Policy, the Presidential Policy promulgated in 2014. Apparently it's up for approval and full on promulgation on Monday. And this year, UC Open Press with Collabora and Luminos. Thank you. And so, okay, great. This is wonderful stuff. We've all can pat ourselves on the back for doing a wonderful job of advocating for the importance of open access and actually bringing about palpable, tangible steps to sort of improve the scholarly communications model. But have we fallen short? Well, let's see. So here's Collabora, first paid-for journal, mega journal successful. I'm pulling from the Collabora website. In addition, it's been viewed more. This is the first article from the blog was August 11th. So, it's been viewed more than 2,640 times, downloaded 167 times. Does anybody know how many of these views and downloads came from a UC library? I don't know the exact number, but I suspect that it's 0 because none of us have bothered to catalog it yet. So this is actually a screenshot from last week, but I could pull it up in OCLC right now. Find it in libraries. There's a very funky little link here. None of us officially, it's not part of our collections, okay? So it's also not in the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals yet either. So if any of you catalogers are out there are eager to, now I've revealed our dirty little secret. Collabora's not cataloged anywhere. Go to it and copy catalog it in your local OPAC. So that's Collabora. How about Luminos? Monographs are a much easier thing. Luminos is, as we all know, it's our new OA platform for monographs. One of our very first titles was Kerman's The Art of the Fugue. So, how are we doing? You can find it here from this library if you go through eBrary, which is, for those of you who don't know, eBrary is a pay-for-view EBSCO product that requires UCB access to get at. So even though this is now officially open to the world in any format, no UC campus has endowed it with that status as a full-on open access piece of scholarly product, as they say. So, okay, well, that can be remedied very quickly. eScholarship's been around for almost 15 years. It's a wonderful product. I have stuff in eScholarship. I'm part of a journal that's in eScholarship. I love eScholarship. I've been talking about eScholarship for a long time. I've bold-faced the two things that I think are most significant about eScholarship as a resource. You can probably know where the next slide's going. Well, this is something that I have uploaded. It's great. I mean, it actually does show up in WorldCat, and it is digitized by UC Mass Digitization. No library, including my own, has cataloged this locally. So that's a big problem with eScholarship. A lot of the stuff that's in eScholarship only lives in eScholarship, and it's findable through the Google optimization, however well the Google optimization works, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. So we look at Google Scholar. How does Google Scholar work? Well, I mean, I'm going to bury the lead, but intellectual property, Google, when it comes to open access anything, Google is the very opposite of open access. So how does related articles work if I'm doing a Google Scholar search? It finds documents similar to the given research result. Well, how similar in what way? Well, that's PageRank. That's a trade secret. We can't tell you what algorithms we use. And in fact, more and more and more, we're not even going to bother listing it if it's not mobile, if it's not mobile optimized. So if you're working on your iPhone or your Android device, you ain't going to find it. So, and then I actually used Google. I used their advice for how to search for my own e-scholarship piece, and I get nothing. I mean, I did exactly what they said. I mean, I could tweak it. I also see they helpfully offer me lots of paywall stuff, which is another issue. And because I don't know why is this Wiley title at the top? Well, maybe Google and Wiley have a deal. Maybe Wiley's buying Google ads. Can I ask them? No, there's no control for it. So that is, I mean, from an information retrieval perspective, I see that as a problem. And that's something that libraries could be doing better to get around this instead of simply handing over the keys to the kingdom to Google and other big for-profit corporations. So next slide. So Whither Discovery. There actually are people who think about this. I mean, I think about it. Librarians think about it. We all think about it. There actually are trade organizations and associations. Probably many of you have heard of this. NFAIS is basically the trade organization for all the big discovery people, American Chemical Society and National Library of Medicine and the National, everybody who makes PubMed and CABI and all the rest of the ProQuest, which is great, So you can actually look and see who they are. They're advocating, they're looking for standards, they're working with NISO, they're doing all kinds of cool stuff to make sure that this stuff works. So there's their membership. There's a lot of corporations on there. There's a handful of libraries, but it's basically just, the for-profit or the societies that are going to make some money off of their indexing tools. So open discovery, that's what I was looking at when I was talking about this, is there a possibility for open discovery? Well, the minute I see ripped from today's headlines that ProQuest and the Ex Libris are, I think Primo Central Index, forgive me for being a little insider at Pool for the non-librarians out here, but I don't see open discovery going anywhere in an environment where these guys are calling the shots. There actually is an open discovery initiative. It's part of NISO. And there's a standing committee. They're looking at this stuff. They're looking at actually opening the discovery layer up to, the non-paywall internet. But you can see who the players are. There's the head. I've scrubbed their names. There are 2 library people. You can see Michigan and Harvard are there, and they're the heads of tech services. So they're basically just looking at, do the standard support whatever technological infrastructure I have for getting this stuff from the vendor through the ILS out to the patron. There's no larger philosophical discussion, as far as I can tell, of the importance of open discovery as a component of open access. So, what can we do? Well, libraries, Ithaca is polling library directors, and they're saying that they're really kind of okay with everybody else, people getting their stuff from something else other than the discovery layer. So, well, okay, maybe that means we can save a little bit of money on our ILS, or we don't have to worry about so much about our OPACs. But I think that's probably not going to, at some point, the gulf between non-open discovery and open access is going to come into sharp conflict. So what can we do about it? We can presumably start our own open discovery initiatives that will lead to improved cataloging, improved indexing, and strongly recommending that open access publishers of whatever stripe make sure that they have standards for metadata, for using Dublin Core, for using indexing terms, controlled vocabularies, whatever tools we have at our disposal, Library of Congress subject headings, libraries certainly know how to do metadata. So how are we doing there? Well, the same Ithaca survey, about the only field where libraries who are presumably the only people responsible for the open discovery component of this are not investing in technical services. So I'm more than happy to talk about that in the breakout and some of my own thoughts. I certainly have faculty colleagues from Berkeley who can talk about their own experiences. We can all get together and see if this is a good thing, a bad thing, something that's not even worth discussing. But I would like to posit that open access, the adjective, should also include the notion, exploring the notion of incorporating open discovery or open bibliographic control into our talk. I mean, with we're actually retrograde. OCLC, the latest WorldCat discovery, is even less. It's even more of a black box than Open WorldCat is. It's very difficult to tell what's going on in any random bibliographic record. And most of the new ILSs, Primo, Cera, et cetera, are the same. So I would really like to see if the library community could sort of work to open the conversation, continue to include the academy, absolutely, but also bring some of this conversation back into our frame of reference to talk about things that libraries and librarians actually do really well, which is categorize, classify, describe, organize, and provide access to the full body of knowledge. So see you in the breakout.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? I will try to speak slowly so you can see that what I have written might be of use to you. I'm going to close this computer because I don't have a PowerPoint for this particular session. In our breakout session, there are going to be two presentations. One will be mine. The other one will be by my colleague Jianye He, who will talk about open access from Chinese area studies perspective. And now I'll just read my spiel. I have been told by some of my dear colleagues that this is my chance to sell my session to the attendees. I must admit that I learned to sell products like Pergo, grout cleaners when I was working for 6 years in Home Depot. But as a librarian, to be honest with you, I never learned to sell anything. But that's not really ephemeral. What is important is to look at the notion of area studies in the epoch of open access from a slightly different perspective or different perspectives. Does this even matter to call myself to be an area studies librarian today? What is even understood by some of us as an area studies librarianship? And I may politely remind you that area studies is, I believe, is the product of World War II world engagement, in which United States actively engaged the world. And I know that I'm using broad spectrum of generalizations about the nature of this benevolent and sometimes not so benevolent at times engagement. But precisely this engagement eventually partially facilitated for the current situation in the Central and Eastern Europe, including that of the open access. It is the area with which I'm reasonably familiar. Do you remember that famous speech we had in our country where somebody was telling somebody, tear down those walls, open up the access, right? Then we look at ourselves and, oh, my proxy is not working. Oh, we didn't pay something for our library, forgot to pay the subscription. Oh, the publisher pulled the journal but never bothered to tell the subscriber. These type of events happen, and we see so many handshakes and we see many cold looks at each other. But what does that open access means to us, right? This is what I'm trying to get at. While my presentation during the upcoming breakout session will focus on some historical aspects of perhaps why and how open access has become one of the popular methods for disseminating the STEM, as well as humanities and social sciences information in the post-socialist Central and Eastern Europes, including in the Russian Federation, the area studies aspect as interdisciplinary post-World War II modus operandi in American and Western European understanding will be partially questioned. As a student of subaltern and post-colonial information studies at UCLA, I was trained in reading and understanding important works, such as Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities and others. I have also, however, appreciated the other view, the view that echoed first in Professor Partha Chatterjee's article entitled Whose Imagined Community? While it is not my place to question the existence of an imagined community, I posit that the evolution of open access correlates to the policy decisions that were made on societal as well as national levels when the paying for these resources becomes unsustainable. While the pundits can easily debate this simple crudeness of my argument, I invoke you to consider it from the viewpoints of both imagined communities and also from the viewpoints of those whose imagined communities changed forever. While the Iron Curtain was being lifted across the Europe, the ensuing initial turmoil and scarcity forced many of the newly independent former Soviet satellite countries in growing the route of the open access. And this, in turn, today is reflected in the robust efforts to implement open access in these countries. Besides, the theme of this conference, Open Access, Reclaiming Scholarship for Academy, hints at an alternate way of providing quality peer-reviewed research information to our faculty, students, and visiting scholars. The assumptions about the market mechanisms that ensure on certain levels constantly rising cost of certain peer-reviewed commercially produced information sources are holding true in the era of new normal. How many of you heard this word new normal? For me, it was quite strange word in American lexicon. What is this new normal? You know, I was in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union had collapsed. I was in the McDonald's. I've been living here for about 15 years. I went back. Can I have a refill? They looked at me, no, you have to pay for it. I said, why? They said, because this is a new normal. Once upon a time in my past life, I was working at one of the Ivy universities that should remain nameless. And we had an event, and I was told to order food. I said, okay, I will order the food. What can I order? You can order anything. I got an email from one of the deans. You can order everything except sushi. That's new normal. I said, what is this? New normal. So that's what I'm going to talk. We are in the new normal. How does these countries have to deal when you don't have money to pay your educators? When you're running, and that's happening in the Western Europe also. Please don't forget the example of Greece. And I have a dear colleague here in the back, Jeremy. He will tell us a little bit more in this breakout session about what's going on. I invoke you to participate in it. And so let me get back to my scripted thing, because off the script is not really good. The thirst and hunger of our faculty members and students, visiting scholars, and members of the public that are engaged in knowledge creation in an information economy also continues to grow. And the budgets tend to lag relatively behind, and the consumption for the consumption of these resources. The open access perhaps represents the other appealing alternative. I hope that you can attend and continue this dialogue and enhance my understanding and enrich me through your perspectives about the relevance of open access from the area studies perspective. Thank you so much.